and then that'll sort of get a general kind of discussion in reference to that. And then that last segment, which is 10 minutes, and we'll talk about general kinds of things that fall within the framework of some of the challenges of African American youth. Let me swallow this little piece of cough drop that I have here. Welcome to the show this morning. The topic this morning is some of the challenges of African American youth, and we're fortunate to have with us to talk about some of the challenges of African American youth, Pastor KWalker, Miss Stephanie Johnson, and Mr. Harold Shaw. Of course, let me welcome all three of you to the show this morning, Pastor. Thank you and welcome to the show this morning. The topic this morning is the challenges of African American youth, and we're fortunate to have with us to talk about some of the challenges of African American youth, Pastor KWalker, Ms. Stephanie Johnson, and Mr. Harold Shaw. And of course, Pastor Walker, Ms. Johnson, and Mr. Shaw, let me welcome the three of you to the show this morning to talk about what I consider to be a very, very important topic, and a topic that the three of you have a lot of information in reference to it. And of course, Pastor Walker, you've been with us on many occasions, as well as Ms. Johnson, you might be new to this particular show, but the three of you should know that this first segment will be made up of what we call your background, education, and experiences. The idea is to give the audience some idea as to who you are, talking about the topic dealing with some of the challenges of African American youth. Then we'll have a break, and we'll come back for an 8-minute segment, and we'll give you an opportunity to further expand upon some of the challenges of African American youth, and then we'll have a break, and our final segment will be 10 minutes, and it gives us an opportunity to sort of bring together all of the information that we've tried to deal with this particular morning. And so let us start off, Pastor Walker, by having you to give us some information, some statements in reference to your background, your education, and some of your experiences. Ms. Johnson will do the same, as well as Mr. Shaw.
Well, thanks again, Dr. Hank, for having me on the show. I've been here many times, born and raised right here in Nashville, Tennessee. Good parents, I call them good parents. They raised me right. I went wrong, but they raised me right. ended up becoming got kicked out of the public school system here, actually in the state of Tennessee. Back then, they had a safety net for me. I was able to go into the military. Now you have to have a GED or graduate to be able to get in now. But back then, you could go in without it. So I went into the military after having also gotten into some trouble. After getting kicked out of the public school system, got out of the military, got a GED through OIC, Opportunities Industrialization Center. From there, did some studies at Tennessee State University. Didn't complete it. My drug addiction got the best of me, drove me out of the college scene, ended up incarcerated in the state prison system. And just lived a lifestyle of crime for many years, 17 plus years drug addiction, crime, and all of that stuff back in 1986. To be exact, August 24th, God intervened in my life, called me away from that lifestyle of drug addiction and crime and everything, and called me into the ministry. And this is what I've been doing ever since. That's what brings me to this show, because I'm always looking to make a difference in the lives of other people.
Very good. And of course, Mr. Johnson, what about you?
Hey, I was born and raised here as well. I grew up in my grandmother's home. She was a foster mom to 100 plus kids here in Nashville over the decades. And so I saw a lot of youth coming in and out. A lot were African American youth. And then I went to Hunter's Lane. It's one of the, I would say, more rougher schools here in Nashville. And there was a lot of fights and violence in there. I went on to go to Regent University, where I got a degree in organizational leadership and management. And there I learned about human trafficking and started doing a lot of work in that, and saw a lot of African American women being put into that trade and whatnot. And so, yeah.
Very good. What about you, Mr. Shaw?
Well, I'm born and raised right here in Nashville too, over in North Nashville. Graduated from Pearl Cone, went into the military, did 20 years in the military. While in the military, I had a chance to do some mentoring and do some work with kids in high school. That what led me to, when I retired, to start my own organization. It's me and some of my dedicated best friends and staff members that I have with it. It's called We Are Relevant, and our main goal is to get these kids ready for college. I read through a website, it's called usnews.com, and it actually gives a grade point for all the different high schools. And then when I seen that Pearl Cone was graduating 87%, only 6% of them was ready for college. So I knew at that time that even though it's 87% sound good, these kids are not ready for college. So we're gonna start at the 5th grade level, and we mentor those kids all the way through high school, and it also has to make sure that they do community service.
And so in a real sense, all three of you represent some efforts to deal with some of the challenges of African American youth. And what we'll do, we'll have our first commercial break, and then we'll come back and we'll allow the three of you to talk about something specifically in reference to some of the problems or some of the challenges or some of the successes of African American youth during this second period following this very, very short commercial break. And of course, what we'll try to do is to join you when we come back with our second segment of the show for the morning. Thank you, and welcome back to the second segment of the show for today. We're talking to Pastor KWalker, Ms. Stephanie Johnson, and Mr. Shaw, and they're giving us some information in reference to some of the challenges of the African American youth. And of course, let's start off with you, Mr. Shaw, by having you to think in terms of some of your activities and how this would fit into some of the challenges dealing with the African American youth, as well as we said earlier, some of the successes. And then Ms. Johnson will give us some basic information in reference to her challenges, and of course Ms. Johnson is going to talk and speak as loud as she possibly can so that we can hear her talk about some of the great things that she's doing in reference to the challenges, and of course Pastor Walker will close us out for this particular segment. Let's start off with you, Mr. Shaw.
Well, some of the most important challenges that our kids have today is education. A lot of these people in a society, just because we come in an urban neighborhoods thinking that the kids are bad, so right off the bat they're branded as being bad. They're not bad. To me, I think they're just uninterested, and it's kind of hard for the kids to be interested in something when the classes are overcrowded. So my organization, being We Are Relevant, WAR is our nickname, because we are at war because these kids are killing kids. So our main goal is to make sure that we can help these teachers out in the classroom. We want these kids to graduate with a 3.5 GPA or better. That way when they do go to college, when they do go on to further their education, they have the backgrounds and the means to be successful, be good in the community, and hopefully they can go out and mentor, do the same things that we're doing. We all have had some bad times in our past, but we've overcome those. As I'm getting older, I'm grateful that I've overcome those. So I want to make sure I pass that knowledge on.
What about you, Stephanie? Let's talk about some of your experiences working with young people, and whether they have been positive experiences or whether they've been negative experiences. Talk about that this morning.
A lot of my experiences have been positive. I am one of those youth as well. I look at a lot of statistics and things like that, and looking at the jail statistics, a lot of those youth who are going into jails, they come from single parent homes, single mother homes. And so we really have to start focusing on that area. And then talking with the police department, they really believe that we need more volunteers in school. And so we see these two areas shouting to us about this is a problem. So if we can see the problem, like this young man, we can start to go in and really focus on it and solve it.
Very good. And I think you mentioned earlier in reference to some of the problems that you've dealt with, dealing with incarceration and information that you have in reference to that. So make some statements in reference to that.
So our
Johnson.
DA's office is not the most, they're very lenient on things, and that's coming from state down. Like they don't want to be looked at as too hard or anything on crime, but a lot of the crime that's happening is repeat offenses. And I understand not wanting to put people in jail because we don't really have a reform system. But there are organizations who believe in reform, like Men of Valor, and I believe we need to support those organizations that are helping to reform people in prisons and be a little tougher in those areas, because if we know that the people that are committing the crimes are repeating it, then we have to do something about it.
You know, Pastor Walker, I think we've talked about this so many times that we assume that everybody understands exactly some of the challenges that our youth face. But at the same time, each time we turn on the television show or read the newspaper and et cetera, we find many, many lives that have gone wrong. Make some statements in reference to that.
Well, Dr. Haney, especially when you talk about the prison system and stuff like that, having spent time in the prison system personally, they said the purpose of incarceration is for punishment and rehabilitation. You get plenty of punishment, in terms of how long you stay incarcerated and being away from society and stuff like that. But when it comes to rehabilitation, that's a whole different thing. There's not a whole lot of interest in rehabilitating individuals incarcerated in the system. And especially when you look at the juvenile system, man, it's somewhat of a joke. And these children are going out here committing crimes, and they're sending them into the juvenile system. But at the same time, I don't think there's enough taking place in there as well to cause any sense of real type of rehabilitation. It's kind of like a joke, and then they get back out. It's like, oh man, that wasn't nothing, until they end up in the big boy penitentiary. But education, as Brother Shaw was alluding to, education is important because people say what you don't know can't hurt you, but what you don't know can destroy you. And a lot of what our youth are dealing with are things that they don't know. And because they don't know it, they get involved in stuff that actually derails their life or takes away opportunities for them to really have a life. And as a result, they're caught up in a system that is by design to destroy them anyway.
Now, Ms. Johnson, when you talk about challenges of African American youth, what are some of the challenges that young females have in society, and what would you suggest that they do in order to try to overcome some of their challenges?
When I was younger, I was exposed to a lot of amazing programs like My Sister Keepers, and I went to a camp that CC Winans put on. And so I don't really see those programs here that much anymore. And so I would love to see a lot of programs that help young girls develop to be young women and to understand relationships and things like that. So yeah, that would be something, yeah.
And Pastor, I think we've mentioned this on many occasions in reference to trying to find methods whereby we might be able to reduce the number of people who are involved in all of the killings and all of the shootings and et cetera. And during these last couple of minutes of this particular segment, make some statements in reference.
Well, Ms. Johnson made a statement. She said that, you know, she went through some programs. She had these programs available to her, but then she said she's not seeing them anymore or seeing them to the degree where they can be effective. You know, and there's a lot of things that's not here anymore. You know, the summer programs that used to exist. I think there was like a Cedar Job program and stuff like that. These different programs that used to exist that our government has taken away, you know, and because the government is not interested in truly helping, you know, African American youth. So, because if they were, they wouldn't be taking away the programs that in the past were helping. So now you got a situation where somebody's got to create some programs now to help the African American youth. That's where you have people like my brother here, Mr. Shaw, with his program War. We are relevant. And it's important because we need this, because our youth need it. They need the education, they need the training, they need the mentoring, man, they need the overall help, and whatever can come up under that umbrella, that's what they need. And that's why I'm glad to have them here today to talk about, you know, some of the things that they can do to bring about some change.
Very good. And so what we'll do, we'll take our final commercial break, and then we'll come back and we'll have 10 minutes for you to further develop some of the things that we've talked about. And we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break. Thank you. Welcome back to the final segment of the show for today. We're talking to Mr. Shaw, Ms. Johnson, and Pastor Walker in reference to some of the challenges and some of the successes in a real sense of the African American youth, recognizing that the same thing that we talk about when we talk about African American youth, we can talk about American youth in general, because I think that all of them have essentially the same challenges and some of the same opportunities. But since we're dealing specifically with African American youth today, we want to deal with those challenges. Mr. Shaw.
Well, I think one of the greatest challenges is that we have to meet these youth on their terms. We can sit here and talk every day on TV shows, we can have rallies in parks, we can march up and down the street, but those youth that's out there committing those crimes and doing that, they're not there. So we have to meet them. That means if we had to go to the school, we have to go to the alternative school, if we had to go door to door and get in their face and let them know that, hey, this is unacceptable, we're not going to stand for it, and let us show you the way. We've all been there, we've all made mistakes. If you just listen to us, just try it one day at a time, you can reduce this. These kids out here just shooting for no reason, I mean, I don't understand it, it's just imperative. And the incarceration rate, like he was saying that they just go into jail and in juvenile and they think it's a joke. They just don't understand it. But the things that you're doing are impacting lives. If you kill someone, there's no coming back from that. Dead is dead. But you can get locked up and you can go inside and you can rehabilitate yourself. Once you rehabilitate yourself and come out, it's imperative that you go out and pass that knowledge on. It's the object of it is to be wise, learn from other people's mistakes. So that is where war is coming into. I work with a lot of different organizations. Gideon Army, of course, is out here in 37208, which is the highest incarceration rate in the country. 37208, that's where I was born. And then we have Dads Against Destruction, my good man, Mr. Philip Hawkins. He's working with fathers and, helping them get off their, lower their child support. So try to put the fathers back into the kids' lives. Once you get all these different organizations, like working with Ms. Johnson, if we can get all these different organizations and get together and pull together, but we got to get on the streets. You got to get these kids where they at. While they standing on the corners, in the corner stores, wherever they at, that's where you got to meet them at. If not, we just fighting a losing battle.
Excuse me, Ms. Johnson, I think you mentioned something about African-American youth incarceration. Speak to that.
Well, I guess basically the reform part. But I would love to see people work before they get to jail. I'm getting into politics right now. I'm running for District 7 Council. And one of my points is education and really involving the youth in their education, how they want to see it. I was when I was younger with the Mayor's Youth Council Summit, talking to the board of directors and telling them this is what we see and this is what we want changed. There's a program with the Civic Design Center where they have a program where they can do architecture and they can go and redesign their communities. Like, how amazing would that be if a youth was able to design their community? They would be less likely to destroy it, in my opinion. So we have to meet them where they're at, ask them what their needs are, what they want to do, and then support them in that.
It seems that no matter what we have to do, Pastor, it seems that the problem is so overwhelming that so many people simply want to turn their back on the problem and walk away. But speak to what we might be able to do to change some of the attitudes that people have in reference to our youth.
As Brother Shaw was saying, you have different organizations and different agencies and different fellowships or sororities or what have you. We need to come together to create an environment that's conducive to positive growth of our youth. Show them something different than what they're seeing, to take them out of the mindset of their immediate environment and show them something else, show them something that's culturally different, show them the possibilities that they have within them, that what's out here is within reach for them as well. But, amazing enough, and you said it, man, is that a bunch of adults can get together, man. We have a youth rally. A bunch of adults having a youth rally. And the youth are not there that we need to be rallying in to get information to. So the thing is, you got to go out there where they are, and you got to deal with them in their environment. It's kind of like you can't go out, if you was a hunter and you was going out hunting some type of game, you can't just turn the TV on and capture that game. You got to go out there exactly into the area where the game is in order to hunt that game. And it's the same thing when it comes to dealing with our youth. We have to go out there where they are and deal with them where they are and talk to them where they are. I've had the opportunity to go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, I was thinking, Mr. Shaw, before we get away for today, that I believe that the economic situation that many of our youth find themselves in has something to do with some of the challenges that they have. Do you believe that if somehow we made some kind of system, a society that would allow every youth, once they complete high school, to have access to a job or some method whereby they might be able to make a little money? A CETA program or whatever program you call it, but one thing that would be assured to them that once they graduate or whatever, they've got a job somewhere.
And that is good because Tennessee Promise is one of the good ones that they get. You know, once they graduate, they can get to go to community college for 2 years. That's a good start, especially if you're planning on, you know, excelling in academics. Mr. Walker, as he said, once he finished his time, he went on and you see now he's a pastor. I mean, so it doesn't matter where you start. It's how you finish the race. You know, as we just seen, we just had a real bad incident in California where Nipsey Hussle killed away, but the name of his clothing store was Marathon because he was saying marathon is not a sprint, it's a marathon life. You have to take your time, you have to excel, but as you were saying, giving these kids some opportunities to get out there and earn some money would be a whole lot better.
Would you think that would be cost effective, Ms. Johnson?
Absolutely. We're investing millions into businesses to come here because of the ROI, the return on they believe it's interest investment. Thank you. I can only imagine if we invested in the youth what our ROI would be. I was invested in, and now I'm coming back. I'm working in my communities. I'm helping businesses develop, nonprofits develop, because I was invested in here. A lot of my background and my passion comes from what I did here in Nashville. So the fact that that's being taken away, you're going to stifle all of that, and we can't continue to do that. So.
Well, now, who do we see, Pastor, to make sure that this could happen? I mean, what would be the first step that we'd have to take? Well, and we've got about 2 minutes, but
we see people like Miss Johnson, who has this mindset and this thought process, running for political office. We see putting people like her in office, that can bring about some changes on that level, because it's going to have to come through from that level. It's going to have to filter its way through all those legislative levels and stuff like that. Somebody in this council is going to have to really get serious about what's going on in our Nashville community, more so, instead of just being interested in Amazon and the NFL draft and all of that stuff like that. Oh yeah, that's great for the city, but what is it doing for the common people of this city? And probably the answer is nothing. But the hotels get to raise their rate, man. Go down there and get you a $450 hotel room that's skyrocketed because this NFL draft is coming to town. But then Ray and them still over there, man, living in poverty. They don't have anything, and they're the one that's sitting there in front of the television sets watching the football games, but they're not reaping any benefits from it at all. But this is the it city.
Yeah,
Very good. And so in a real sense, we believe that some of the challenges that we've talked about and some of the challenges that we face can really be met. You see, that we don't necessarily have to turn our backs and walk away, but we do have to be willing to put some kind of effort and some kind of organization in reference to some of these problems. And I think that the three of you sort of represent, in a real sense, what an individual can do in reference to. You can't do everything, but I think that if more people felt like the three of you feel this morning, then at least we would be able to do better than we're doing. We might not ever overcome all of the challenges, but we can say that we tried, and I think that's about the only thing that we can possibly do. And let me thank you, and let me encourage you to tune in again next week for another informative edition of Comments. Thank you, and good morning.
You don't remember that?
Oh man, so many people have been.
No, this girl was asleep.
Allen, give me a mic check real quick. Say your name and count to 10.
My name's Howard Allen. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
All right, say the ABCs, please.
A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z.
Still. No, you're good.
Okay?
And so this person was asleep on the bench.
On the bench, yeah, she was
Right off from the river.
She was on the pillow out there in the water, you know, and
A pillow in the water. In the
Like-
water itself.
yeah, like jump from here to there.
In the river.
Yeah, right there. And so they jumped, and on the dare, one of them pushed her. And she went to Tennessee State, but she was bipolar. And she had been sleeping at Hard Rock Cafe, had been taking care of her, buying her cigarettes and feeding her. And she was black. And 2 white men out of Wilson County just went on a dare, jumped and killed her. And then they wouldn't move the barge, so it happened on the 11th. On the 22nd, they moved the barge and she popped up. Gave the guy 15 years for pushing her.
I'm so sorry to hear that. I'm sure I heard.
Yeah,
It's so much that happens to folks, man, and to declare yourself to be homeless. Now, in other words, Brother Allen, you're telling me that.
It could have been me.
No, I'm
Yeah.
telling you that you live the existence of a person Thank you and welcome to the show this morning. The topic is Amazon and gentrification in Nashville. And we're fortunate to have with us to talk about Amazon and gentrification in Nashville, Mr. Howard Allen. And of course, Mr. Allen, let me welcome you to the show this morning and to remind our audience that you're no stranger to this show or to this topic, that you've been with us on a number of occasions, and we've had an opportunity to talk to you about many, many things. But I think what we'd like to do today is to talk about the gentrification of Nashville seen from the point of view of an individual who has been, I might call you a certified homeless person, which is to say that you were the real thing in terms of what we mean when we talk about people who are homeless and don't have a place to live. And you know many of the challenges that are faced by the homeless population, many things that the average person might not even think about. You see, and so that's what I want you to do this morning, to give us some information in reference to gentrification, but as well as information in reference to the homeless population in Nashville.
Okay, first of all, it's a pleasure to be here with you, Dr. Haney. I'm a Nashvilleian. I was born and reared here, and I've seen a lot of different changes here in Davidson County, the so-called It City, better known as the Music City, USA, Nashville, Tennessee, the capital of the state of Tennessee. And as I said, my parents were educators, and I went to private school, and I'm a North Nashville person. I was born at, they call George Hubbard Hospital, better known as Meharry. But, you know, I just didn't become homeless. You know, I had worked, and some things, some decisions that I made brought me into the homeless situation. And once you get into that, it's hard to get out of. because you have a wall there, and our president talks about building a wall, not letting the refugees in. We have a wall that the homeless population, which is one of the lowest forms of poverty, that's part of poverty of the United States, where they don't let you come back in once you fall. But yeah, gentrification right now, we got a company that's trying to come here, Amazon. The owner's worth $110 billion. He just got a divorce a couple of weeks ago and made his wife the fourth richest person in the United States, $36 billion. But you know, you have gentrification, which means to uplift, to rebuild. And it's happening a lot in the African American communities, better known as the hood or the ghetto. We had a situation where it was a town called Germantown, and then right behind Germantown there was a little suburb division called Salemtown. Now Salemtown looks just like Germantown. Now I can go and build business here, and the projects are right here, but that property taxes, where that building is raising the property taxes where that project is. So that's a form of gentrification because it's going to displace people. Now, dealing with the homeless population, we don't have any place to go now because they like to use the word affordable housing. But these businesses all come through MDHA, which stands for the Metro Housing Development Housing Authority. They're not building low-income housing. They're building what they call affordable housing. They're building condos. They're building garages. They're building hotels. They have to go through MDHA, which stands for the development of the city, not for the trickle-down effect where we feel it, the low-income people. So gentrification plays a major, major part in our city right now because we're losing a lot of history. And you can go to certain areas of town where you have a church here, and you have condos here, and the projects are right here. So, you know, the system is not set up like it used to be back in the day. We had African-American leaders, well, before we became African, known as black leaders, because each year we changed from being colored to Negroes to black to African-American. But the church played a role, our politicians played a role, our lawyers played a role, and I just don't see that like it used to be, because back then we were threatened just by the color of our skin, where someone could be killed. I look at the other day we had, I'm Catholic, Notre Dame, and I thought they were talking about Notre Dame University, but it was over in Paris, France. They've already got $1 million for the rebuilding of this monumental church. But we have 3 churches in the South that was burned by a sheriff's deputy. And then that might be a form of gentrification right there because they might not have the money to rebuild, and then the big corporations come in and buy that land, and there it is. That's a form of gentrification.
Okay, and so what we'll do, Brother Allen, is to take our first commercial break and come back and allow you to further elaborate upon some of the challenges that the homeless population is facing in Nashville and by extension in other areas. And we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break. Thank you and welcome back to the second segment of the show for today. We're talking to Mr. Allen, who is the person that is giving us some information in reference to the homeless population. And of course, Mr. Allen, Howard Allen, I forgot the Howard for,
okay.
for a minute, Mr. Allen, even though we've had you with us on a number of occasions. But anyway, what we'd like for you to do is to simply give us some information in reference to the homeless population and some of the challenges that our audience might not know. We read about the homeless population all the time and simply dismiss them. Yeah. But tell us some things that you think that the population ought to know about being homeless in Nashville.
Well, when you're homeless here in the so-called It City, you're surviving. You're not living, and I want you to know it's hard for me. I have a system of how to do things, but it's 3 times harder for a woman, because you might have a woman that has been under domestic violence. She might have lost her job. Her rent might have went up, and then it's best for a woman to have a friend, and then you might be able to kind of maneuver a little bit, because if you don't, you know, you might be as humble and Christian as Jesus himself, but when you become a woman and you're out here on the streets and you don't have anything to eat and you can't use the restroom, whether you can't make it to the library or the bus station when they shut down, we have no place to use the restroom. We get caught using the restroom and get 3 convictions. That's sex offender registry. We're on that. But that woman would have to do certain things that she wouldn't have to do if she had housing. And that's when we become her worst nightmare, men. But for men, we have the same thing out here on the street that's in housing. We have some people that have WPHDs, but they've become alcoholics, so instead of saying I'm a doctor, they say I'm a drunk. We have lawyers, former lawyers, architects, plumbers. And then I want you to know something. One of the biggest stereotypes is that we won't work. 2/3 of the homeless community work, but we're not making a living wage job. They're making $7.25 an hour. So you might have to get a friend with you so you can get a hotel room for that night, and it's like a dog chasing its tail, because you're not making a living wage. You might get one night's sleep with a partner and you'll be able to buy you a pack of cigarettes or wine or whatever. They say we drink, you go home and have a cocktail. That's because you have a room or a house. But if we get caught drinking out on the street, we're alcoholics or whatever, you know. The same thing that's in housing is out here on the street.
That's quite a bit of discrimination.
Oh,
in a
very
real
much
sense
so.
Against the homeless population.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that also, but then they play with the numbers. You know, they want to say 2,400 homeless in Davidson County. I can take you down Gallatin Road, Murfreesboro Road, Dickinson Road, Charlotte, and show you 2,000 on each one of those streets. Then they don't want to talk about the population of the metropolitan school kids that are in Davidson County metro schools that are homeless.
You think that there's a large number of, well, where does an individual who has children, where does his children go to school? I mean, they have to go to school somewhere.
They go to the metro public schools, but they can't give us the exact number. But we know, I know at least 2 years ago, it was estimated that we had 8,000 metropolitan public school kids that were homeless.
Homeless, no place to call.
And so they try to say that we have like 24, 25, they do the count. But I estimate, because I'm out here on the street, we have at least between 23 and 24,000 homeless individuals in Davidson County. And gentrification plays a part on that, because sometimes we're camping our tents out where they're doing the gentrification, you know, and until we have to move, you know. It's just
there's
like,
no kind of stability in terms of your life and whatever.
Well, like I said, I'm surviving. I'm not living. I mean, this is the lowest form of poverty, and we have over 140 million people that live in poverty. But this is the lowest form when you're out on the street. Like I said, the Metro Housing Development Agency, they use the word affordable housing. They're building condos. They're not building low income. The only thing that's going to be affordable housing for me is if they arrest me because where I camp, I'm camping illegally because I'm camping on metropolitan government property. But I do pay taxes, even though I'm not paying the taxes like they think by buying cigarettes or whatever. That's how I pay my taxes. So that's my property. I feel like you won't bill for me, so I'm camping on public property. So therefore, when they arrest me, they're going to send me to affordable housing, which is called a jail. And it will, our new jail will
That's
open up.
affordable housing.
Yeah, it's green light special.
Uh-huh.
And they're gonna open this new jail up in July. So, and then right now we're getting ready to have something very, very big and spectacular that's gonna happen in Nashville called the NFL Draft. So they're gonna start arresting a lot of the homeless individuals that are out here on the street because they don't want people to see that part of the so-called It City. And the thing of it is, economic advance is not the same as human progress. And that's what we need here, human progress. We need the churches to stand up and say things. We need our community leaders to stand up and say things. We need our government officials to stand up and say things. And see, and the thing you can do on Sunday is go to church and worship a poor man. And guess what? He was homeless. And his name is Jesus. And then you ignore one Monday through Saturday.
And so the homeless population really isn't given any real opportunity to move beyond homelessness. Would you say that might be?
Well, what they do is a lot of talk. They want to act like they want to really help us, but they're not helping us at all because anytime, if you have an experience, B.B. King used to say, in order for you to sing the blues, you had to live the blues. So there's no way someone that hasn't experienced a homeless lifestyle can tell me how to live because you don't know. So if you're going to discuss something and not include us in the discussion, you're doing nothing for us at all.
So there's a lot of uncertainty in a real sense. There's no real pattern in terms of how, when you get up in the morning, you don't have any idea where you might lay your head.
Well, I do. I do.
I mean, I know there's a lot of ways of accommodating it, but the thing about it is that's a mindset that people have, that even though you might have a place, that place might not be there for you when you get there at that night.
Well,
it's
you're right.
Uncertainty in reference to it. And I would imagine that that's a real challenge just in terms of being able to live and to have any kind of social life and any kind, I mean, how does that work
It's
out?
no social life, and you're right. One morning I left from my tent, and it'll be a year, April the 21st, I left from my tent because I was doing a documentary called The 2Nashvilles filming. And when I came back, my tent was burned to the ground. So therefore, I didn't have a place. And so, but it's really, really sad because you don't have just a place to go eat or a place to sleep, and you have to think about that. That's stress.
Okay, so what we'll do, we'll take our first commercial break, and we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break. Thank you, and welcome back to the final segment of the show for today. We're talking to Mr. Howard Allen, and the topic is homelessness and gentrification in Nashville. And so let's see if we can look at this last segment, Mr. Allen, and to have you to enlighten our audience in terms of some of the challenges over the next 10 minutes of being homeless. When you get up in the morning, do you have, what about taking care of your body and eating? I mean, what are some of the typical kinds of things that persons that don't have a home face once they get up out of whatever bed they're laying in at that particular moment?
Well, we have been blessed with Father Charles Strobel that does the Room in the Inn, where during the winter months from November the 1st to March 31st. The churches bring us in, and therefore that takes a big burden off a homeless individual for that night because he's able to take a shower, get up and have breakfast. But for me, I just have a system, and I can't just tell you everything I do because some of it's top secret. But anyway, we have a company called, a nonprofit called Shower Up, and that's a great organization where they have 2 shower trucks. They bring them on Saturday, Sundays, and Mondays downtown where you can go in and take a nice hot shower and get a change of clothes. But it's kind of hard when you can't just go down to the campus or the mission. Some people don't want to go to the mission to take a shower, so you just have to deal with that situation. But I wanted to let you know that homelessness now starts with babies because, you know, you can take my house, you can take my money, you can take my wife, and then you can run into another young lady whose husband, house, and money's been taken. But one thing you can't stop people from doing, that's having sex. And they do that in the homeless community just like they do it in the housing community. So kids are being born in homelessness. Our homelessness population is starting very high now with youth. I mean, from 18, 19, 20, 22, 24. We have a large LBGT community in the homeless population. So I don't know what's that like for some of them because that's like a double whammy because they're gay and they're homeless too. But, you know, it's just a lot of different aspects dealing with homelessness, and nobody said in the 3rd grade, said it and said, I'm gonna grow up to become homeless. It's just decisions happen, things happen, loss of rent, sickness, whatever can happen. And you can become without. I mean, you know, you had people that dealt with Katrina, you had people that dealt with the fire in Gatlinburg, and even though they had insurance and eventually they were gonna be rebuilt, but for that moment they were homeless and they were dependent on a disaster relief, Red Cross or the church or whatever to help. And none of us in the homeless community are asking for a handout. We just want a hand up. And it's hard to get that because some people, homelessness scares a lot of people. Either you might pull me down where you are, or, and then sometimes they act like they don't see it, but you see it every day. And then you see the gentrification process happening every day.
All around the homeless.
Not just all around downtown, and I mean, you don't have your police, your nurses, your teachers, your doctors. They can't live in Davidson County because this cost of living is so high. So they're living in Wilson County, they're living in Rutherford County, they're living in Robinson County, they're living in Montgomery County because you can't afford to live here. And I can remember when Nashville was a good place to live, it was top secret, and I mean, a nice blue place, and now, man, it's got the New York, California aspect, but with the money, and it's just wrong, you know? It's just wrong. And so I think eventually things will flatten out, and the millennials, the city has turned from what it used to be to a millennial city, a police city, and a tourist city. But the millennials are eventually going to play out, and then all this stuff that they're building eventually, I think in the next 5 to 7 years, will go from affordable housing to low-income housing. Because my father sees, he carries us, you know, he sees.
Yeah, you look at all of the construction that's built downtown, and what you're saying is that once people no longer can afford to live in these houses, what generally becomes of all of the housing?
Yeah, I think it become low income. But right now, this city is full of corporate greed. Corporate greed. They're putting the profit before the people, and the people are the most important weapon aspect in the city, because we are the ones that make the city run.
You think that, is there any effort, Mr. Allen, to sort of organize the homeless community? And if not, what would be some of the obstacles in terms of bringing people together and making them have a common purpose in terms of uplift?
Well, I'm going to tell you, I was kind of protected when I was growing up. I'm a 61 baby. So some of my close friends, like Howard Gentry, was like a brother to me. I was kind of protected when that civil rights stuff was going on. I remember when Kennedy, Malcolm, King, Medgar, all of them, and Robert Kennedy got killed, you know. So I was kind of protected doing that. But let me tell you, I see some of the same similarities in the homeless community as far as dealing with blacks, the black community. Two things I know. when you have a census, you never get the accurate count on an African American family, and you never will on a homeless family either.
Why
So,
is that?
because when we don't want to be seen, we won't be seen. And the homeless community, we walk down the alleys, we sleep under the railroad track, and we'll know when the count is coming at 2 o'clock in the morning. So we're not going to be at our camp. And African Americans are the same way. But yeah, and we're not together just like the African
Well,
Americans.
now, what is the purpose of trying to make an assessment in terms of the people in Nashville who are homeless? I mean, what's the purpose of that?
I'm gonna tell you, the homeless community is a community that you can make money off of. Homelessness is a $1 billion industry, so it's a commodity. They talk. Now, some people actually do really want to help, but that's a $1 billion industry. So why fix that? If you were a case manager, you had 800 people that you had to put in housing, and you put 800 people in housing, what's that gonna leave you after you put them in without a job? So why fix that? And it's a revolving door. People become homeless every day. People that you wouldn't think to be homeless are homeless. And I see a lot of people tell me, Howard, you don't look homeless. What does homeless look like? So I asked the question, you know? And who would you say is the most famous homeless person that you know in your life? Dr. Haney, who would you say?
I'm not sure I would know.
It'd be Jesus.
Jesus. Oh, yeah, I see what you're
Okay.
saying.
Yeah, that's how I get a lot of people. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Jesus.
Without anything.
That's
in a
right.
real
Anything.
sense.
That's right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very good.
Yeah.
Well, how many homeless people relate to Jesus, though?
Oh, we got to get it we get that every day, especially if you're in the mission.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, they come. That's how they come, the religious aspect.
Uh-huh.
But let me tell you, we know them better than a lot of people because anytime, like me, for instance, I've slept in 15-degree weather, and I drink a lot of water where I was in a box. And when I woke up the next morning, I was able to break my box down. And then when I went to get my water was froze. And my body's 85% water. So that's God. It's nobody but God, and I know it. Here I am, asleep and able to get up, and then I break my campsite down, then I go back to get my water, and my water's froze.
And so now there are a large number of what you call campsites scattered throughout the city of Nashville and et cetera. And these are at almost indiscriminate places.
That's
of
right.
Any place that you would under bridges and then.
Yeah, we make our campsites anywhere. I mean, we can be up under the interstate, we can be by the railroad tracks, we can be up under somebody's garage or whatever, you know, wherever you think we're not, that's where we are. So that's what I also tell the government officials. So when you're gonna be a councilman or a governor or a senator or a congressman, you gotta be that for everybody. So, you know, don't stop me because you're an elected official. Now all of a sudden you have life insurance for your medical insurance for you and your whole family for life. Why would you go in there and vote for me not to be able to have the same thing? You know, it's a divide there.
Well, now, is there any end to all of this, Mr. Allen? I mean, what would you say over the last 30 seconds that we need in order to turn this around?
Well, like I said, you're gonna have to include the homeless to be able to deal with the situation of fixing it, fixing the problem, because it can be fixed and we can curb it. And it's just time for someone to be able to come together and sit at the table with the governor or the mayor and say, this is what needs to be done here.
Very good. Let me thank you, and let me encourage our audience to tune in again next week for another informative edition of Comments. Thank you, and good morning.
No question about it. Yeah, yeah. The 40 acres and a mule
That's right.
concept is what really initiated.
And I generally do 5 each setting, but we lost Alana this morning,
Lost what?
my granddaughter. She didn't come.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, she's generally my first show every morning.
Oh, okay. What does she do? She interviews?
Yeah, she. Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you and welcome to the show this morning. The topic this morning is the story of civil rights organizations in America. And we have to talk about the story of civil rights organizations in America, Dr. Lewis Baldwin. And of course, Dr. Baldwin, let me welcome you to the show this morning.
Thank
and
you.
let me make our disclaimer as we do each time.
Yeah.
And
Thank
we're
you
so
much.
delighted to have you, and you're such an eminent individual, and we try to have you as many times as we possibly can.
Thank you.
Because we know that you've got a lot of information, you've got a lot of books, and you're very much aware of what is going on, not only within the African American community, but within all communities, and you're just a learned man.
Thank
I'm not
you.
whether you're
Thank you.
self-made or whatever you are, but however it came out, you were there.
Thank you
and
so
And
much.
you've made tremendous contributions.
Pleased to be here. Thank
Now,
you.
what we'd like to do, Dr. Baldwin, is to have you to give us some information dealing with the growth and decline
Yeah.
of civil rights organizations in America,
Yes,
and
yes.
to give us some directions between now and the end of the show as to what we must do in order to bring many more people into such participation.
Yeah.
Let's start off by having you to give us some statements in reference to Dr. Lewis Baldwin and say something about your books and et cetera. And then at the end of this segment, we'll be able to go into civil rights organizations, the story of civil rights organizations in America, from the 8 minutes to the 10 minutes to the end of this show.
Very
Let's
good.
start it from that perspective.
Well, I'm a native of Camden, Alabama. I grew up in Camden, Alabama, Wilcox County, Alabama, in late 40s, 50s. Studied at the public schools in Wilcox County, Alabama. Graduated from high school in 1967. And from there, of course, to Talladega College in Talladega, Alabama. I was there from 1967 to 71 with a major in history and a minor in political science. From there to Crozet Theological Seminary, where I studied theology and black church studies, 1971 to 75. And in the fall of 75, I matriculated at Northwestern University in Evanston, Illinois. And in 1980, received a PhD degree in the history of Christianity. Most of my scholarship has been in the area of King studies, Martin Luther King.